When I came on board, I never had a family member that had, been a patient of Shepherd's Cove or any sort of hospice. At that point, I was almost 30 years old, still had all 4 of my grandparents, never experienced loss. And so I came on board, and I remember going through new member orientation, and there were all these people that were talking about all these things that Shepherd's Cove had done for them and their families. And I remember thinking how blessed I was, one, that I still had all 4 of my grandparents, all my family members that were accounted for, but also just hearing everybody's stories about how incredible the organization was and what it had done for them and their families, that I knew it was something special and something that was set apart from other organizations of the same like. Fast forward to July of last year, my grandmother, she'd been declining for a while, and we couldn't necessarily get a correct diagnosis as to what was going on. But she had been having some severe back pain and just really some pain that wouldn't go away. She was not herself. So she receives a cancer diagnosis. And at that point, we don't realize the severity of it, but we know that it's bad. And so we come together as a family. We're trying to decide what's best. At this point, hospice hasn't been mentioned. We don't know the severity of how bad her prognosis is. So fast forward 1 week later, July the 13th, she goes and meets with her primary care physician, and he uses the word terminal, tells her that she has pancreatic cancer that's metastasized to her spine, and she is, every organ in her body is covered in cancer at this point. So at that point, she is referred to a hospice of her choice. And of course, the natural choice is Shepherd's Cove Hospice. It's just down the street, something that we've known the name for a long time. I'm associated with, but we don't know the care other than from the stories that we've heard of other family members distant that have received care of that sort. And so she received the diagnosis at probably 11 o'clock that morning. My whole family is at her house. She's referred, hospice and home health. They're setting up a bed by 2 o'clock that afternoon. So within 3 hours, she's in her, what would eventually become the last place she would be, I guess. 6 days after her diagnosis and after she was onboarded as a patient, she passed in the inpatient unit. She was diagnosed on a Wednesday, and 2 days later, a Friday, my mom calls me. This is my paternal grandmother. My mom calls me probably on Friday night around 10:30 or so, and she's like, hey, your grandmother, something's not exactly right. We don't know exactly what's happening. We've called the hospice nurse. She had been unresponsive, but she was majorly unresponsive at this point. She had what seemed to be no quality of life left other than that she was just breathing. And so the hospice nurse came to my grandparents' house. All my family went that night because we thought she was going to pass. And we got there around 11 o'clock that Friday night, and the hospice nurse came in, and she started talking to us about what she thought was happening. She thought that, she was just declining. And then all of a sudden, my grandmother came to, and later we found out that's what's called a surge. And she had a surge of energy, and she wanted to sing. And so she wanted to sing. We all stood in a circle, and my grandparents have a den and a formal living room. And so we all stood in the living room, and she wanted to sing Amazing Grace. And so we all stood in a circle and held hands around her, and the hospice nurse that was there that night was just right there with us. I looked over at one point, and she just had tears falling down her face with everyone else in our family, and I think that just says a lot about the family aspect of us. This nurse has no connection to our family, no connection to my grandmother. It's the first time she's met her. She's been a patient at Shepherd's Cove for 2 days at this point, and she's made a connection with our family, and she's there for us and in the trenches with us the entire time. And I just think that says everything that you need to know about this organization.